you know what though? Like, you're not going to have a career here. It's too hard. Nobody's going to give you visas. You're not going to set yourself apart from your peers. Just go back to Canada. It is not possible. And I said, did he just tell me I can't do something? Did he just tell me that this is not possible? Hold my beer. I don't even like beer, but like, hold my beer. I've always had that competitive spirit, and I think even more had this fight in me. When I was born, Lee, I almost died. I had the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck, and I didn't get to see my mom. And so I had to really fight, I think, before I was even, I had to fight to survive. I got to put together a few smaller marketing plans. Like, there was these horses and they dance, and it was very strange. And I was like, this is weird. But that was the thing that I was given. I'm going to mess this up. Lippenzier stallions. Anyway, very cool. We as humans don't give ourselves enough grace. And so I think that's really important. And then the other piece of that is really having hope. You got to have something to believe in. You have to look back and go, hey, it has always gotten better. This will get better. Here are the things that I need to do in order for that to happen. And I think that experience really shaped, to your point earlier, how I approach life. If the door isn't open, sometimes you have to knock. And then other times, Lee, you have to build the door yourself.
Welcome to Embracing the Journey, Living Beyond Limits. Today, I'm joined by Marie Keeler, Vice President at the Fiesta Sports Foundation and an Emmy-winning leader in sports marketing. From her roots in Canada to her impact on the NFL and the global stage of the World Cup, Marie is a powerhouse for women in sports. Today, she shares why you can't wait for proof to see what's possible. Sometimes you just have to build the door yourself. So let's dive in. Marie, thank you for joining me on my podcast. It's a pleasure to finally connect with you, obviously through Marguerite. And I'm excited to learn a little bit more about you. Obviously, we've had a little bit of a conversation off this about kind of a little bit about your background and your successes. So before we get into some of the questions that I'm intrigued to know, kind of your path and your story, is there any specific turning points in your life to date that kind of stands out as a moment, like a aha moment, or something where things change for the better, for the worse, that really stands out on your journey as to kind of where you came from and where you are today? And we'll start there and see what this conversation entails a little bit later.
My gosh, just go right in, right, Lee?
Yeah, we've had our introduction with all the technical issues we've had. So let's dive straight in and then we'll backtrack a little bit as we go. I like to put you on your toes from the very beginning.
I like it. Well, I think in terms of like an aha moment or really a turning point, it's just ultimately, I think it's the deep belief in yourself, right? Throughout your journey. There's been times when I've been told no, and have sort of fought through. And so I would just say, these aha moments sprinkle throughout your journey, and you just got to have a sense and pay attention and kind of lock it in a little brain pocket, so that you can learn and grow from it. So I would say just really determination and belief is really what propelled me throughout my life, my journey, my career. Yeah, so that's what I would say.
So in terms of career, can you give me a little bit of a kind of a fast track path of kind of where you've come through and where you are now, so we can get a little bit of perspective on kind of the situation that you're in currently?
I went to university in northern New Jersey, so or that's where I ended my university career, and I interned at Madison Square Garden. Post my athletic career, I looked at different opportunities that would help me kind of be above my peers. So interning, going into the city 3+ times a week, interning at Madison Square Garden in the summer and a little bit of the fall, working at Marvel Entertainment, again in New York City, where I first started drinking coffee. Thank you, coffee. And then from there, my first real job was at a smaller kind of sports marketing startup in Rockaway, New Jersey, called All American Games. And what we did there was the U.S. Army All-American Bowl And at that time, it was like sort of like McDonald's All American Bowl, but for football, East versus West. So the top high school players in the East versus the top high school players in the West. And then I helped them build Football University, which is like top elite NFL football camps, and created and produced a reality show that in the second season aired on MTV2. And from there, you know, years later, I was ready for sort of the change and next step. And I worked for the Detroit Lions in the NFL for 4 years. So I moved to Michigan, didn't really know anybody, moved to Michigan. Following that, and I worked in marketing, obviously. Following that, I was fortunate enough to move to Los Angeles, which never in my wildest dreams did I think, my career would take me from New York City to Los Angeles, California. Yeah, and so I worked at Fox Sports in brand marketing for 9 years. And now I'm here in Scottsdale, Arizona at the Fiesta Sports Foundation, where I've been, gosh, here for a little over a year, leading our marketing and brand, and it's been really great.
Okay. And you grew up in Canada, right? From our previous conversation.
Yeah.
So, tell me a little bit about your upbringing in Canada, and how did that turn into a kind of a university journey to Fairleigh Dickinson and New York and then beyond?
Yeah. I was born in Alberta, Canada, which is west, but I grew up in New Brunswick, Canada, which is a really small province. You have to speak French and English, which I do, and which I'm super proud of. I grew up in a very small town called Dalhousie, New Brunswick, for the first, 10 years, or eight. I moved there when I was 2, so 8 years of my life. And then I moved to a big city called Fredericton, New Brunswick, which really afforded me a lot of opportunities. I have a sister who's 14 months younger than me. I was raised by my single mom, who's just incredible. And then ultimately my stepdad, Victor. My dad was in the picture, up until a certain age. I keep in touch with him now, but back then, we sort of separated when I was about 10, when we moved to Fredericton, New Brunswick. And what that afforded me was more access to sports and things like that. Dalhousie is a very small town, the northern kind of tip of New Brunswick, right next to Quebec. So we moved to Fredericton, which is the capital of New Brunswick, Canada, in the Atlantic Maritime provinces. And yeah, so grade 6 is where I started, and I was there throughout high school.
How does Dalhousie compare to Scottsdale, Arizona? Is it
It
same?
doesn't, you know what I mean? It really doesn't. But what it does is it makes me see Scottsdale maybe different than other people, right? Big city, access, malls, shopping centers, the best restaurants, you name it. Dalhousie, I think there was maybe like 2 restaurants, and when we were little, maybe once a year we got to go to Campbellton, which was 20 minutes away, for McDonald's, which was really exciting. And so you appreciate things, you really, really do. The nice thing about growing up in Dalhousie was I was on a block, Montgomery Street, with like 50 kids. So we were outside all the time. And I think, I was always active. I was always outside till, your mom calls you in for dinner. It's snow. So you have snow banks. Like, that's a thing that Scottsdale also doesn't have. We don't deal with the snow, although I'll take any tips to deal with this heat. We're March and it's already about to be 100 degrees. But I grew up, with weather, with 6 months of winter, negative 40 degrees, and it really didn't phase me. You wear your snowsuit, you get ready, and you just want to be outside and play and have fun. And so that was really fantastic, I think, just from a community perspective, and socializing and friends, and learning about yourself. I didn't really play any sports because I really wanted to play hockey. When I was 5, I wanted to play hockey with the boys. We just couldn't afford it. Hockey is an expensive sport. You need equipment. You need, 2 parents usually that, are committed to driving you to the rink at 5 a.m. And I just didn't have that. So I just played outside and ran around and tag and, all that good stuff. And so that was Dalhousie. Fredericton, I don't even know the population now, but Fredericton definitely had, lots more access, sports, things of that nature. And that's where I started my soccer career, which catapulted me to where I am today.
And what was the reason why your family moved from Dalhousie to Fredericton? Was that any specific reason why that move
Yeah, that's
happened?
a great question. I think I grew up in a very difficult household. Um, and so it was the moment where my mom, my sister, and I left, my father in the situation at hand and started sort of a new life for ourselves. And really big kudos to my mom. She was going to university, she was working, and she just figured it out. And when you look back and say, gosh, like, how did you do all that? He has a single mom and musician and no money. And she's like, you just do it, literally. You don't think about it, you just do it. And, a lot of sacrifice, a lot of closeness between the three of us, my sister, Karen, and my mom and I, to really be a unit, to make it through.
Do you have a big family in Dalhousie, or pretty small, like extended family?
Zero
What does
family
the
in
family?
Dalhousie, no connections or ties to Dalhousie. Both my parents grew up in really big families in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is probably it's the biggest city in the Maritimes, Atlantic provinces. And for those who don't know, if you kind of go to Maine and you keep going north, you'll run into New Brunswick, and then Nova Scotia, PEI, and Newfoundland are all connected. And so my parents grew up in Nova Scotia, Canada, two big Catholic families. My mom was one of 12 brothers and sisters, and my dad had 10 brothers and sisters. And now my stepdad, who I met later in life, has 9 brothers and sisters. So big, you know, poor Catholic families. So I have a lot of extended family and cousins and everything like that, which is great. I have 2 stepsisters from Victor's side, my stepdad. So I would say that's where my family is. My sister is in Dallas, which is really nice, with my nephews and my brother-in-law and his family. My mom and Victor, my stepdad, they do half and half, half Canada, half US, and they're in Florida, so they get to be closer to us.
So your family is pretty
Yeah.
scattered. Yeah. Uh, do you ever get to? I know obviously there's situation there with the family, but is there ever any big get-togethers that come back together with the family, or?
We used to have like these really fun big family reunions. I think now I will go back in the summer. Last year I was there for 3 weeks, which was fantastic. I usually try to go take a trip to Nova Scotia and see everybody. I'm still really close with some high school friends in Fredericton. So when I go back home, we sort of just pick back up where we started, which is really nice after not seeing each other for a year or 2 years, or that sort of thing. As it relates to family, usually try to see a group of them, once a year. And now as you get older, it becomes so much more important.
So you said that obviously in Dalhousie, was it you wanted to play hockey, 5 years old, barriers kind of stopped you from doing that. But that didn't stop you from just being active and doing those things.
Exactly.
So you went to Fredericton. That right?
Yep.
That's it. So why did the soccer career start? Because obviously we'll talk a little bit about your recruiting yourself, is what we spoke about a lot previously. What was the appeal for soccer? Was that just accessibility, no barriers to play? Tell me a little bit about that journey to start playing soccer.
Yeah, I was 11 years old when I first picked up a soccer ball. Um, it was through a friend who, my mom's friend at the time, who then later turned into my stepdad. He was a huge soccer fan, huge Man U fan. He was coaching with his best friend this boys team. I guess it was a co-ed team, and I had just moved there and didn't know anybody, and so they threw me on this co-ed soccer team where I was the only girl with all these boys who were actually really good. I was shy, but I kind of fought through and just showed up, very nervous. I was the worst. Oh, I was the worst player on the team. But I was like, hey, this is like kind of cool and sort of interesting. And these boys are good. And oh my God, the ball is at my feet. What do I do? And you just kind of figure it out. And, day by day, you grow. After that, I started playing on girls' soccer teams. And I vowed, like, I don't want to be the worst player on the team. I remember, I think maybe under 13 girls soccer. in Fredericton. I wasn't the best player, and I vowed to do everything I could so that the next summer I would be one of the better players or best players. And I trained, throughout the winter, indoor soccer, which is a really great tool, especially parents. If you're ever debating whether to put your kid into indoor soccer, you get a lot more touches on the ball, more experience. And so it really helped me grow and get better. And then I became one of the better players on the team through discipline and dedication. A lot of other people were playing all these different sports, and I just stayed focused and became one of the best players on the team my last year of under 13. And I just fell in love with the sport. Um, I think I had coaches and teachers try to get me into field hockey or, whatever. And I just wasn't, it wasn't soccer. So I fell in love with the game when I was probably 12. Yeah.
Yeah, because I can imagine that hockey is the number one sport in that area, right? So, was soccer not quite as popular as a sport, or was it still pretty big when you were playing growing up?
I mean, it was popular. Like a lot of the great athletes in town played soccer. I would say basketball is really big. Lacrosse is big there now, but where I grew up, it wasn't that big at the time. And then of course, hockey. I remember, going to take my SATs in Maine, United States, with a bunch of hockey players, because that was sort of their journey. So soccer wasn't number one, but we had a nice league going, and I think soccer in Canada, the access is a lot more. And so uh yeah, it was really beneficial.
So you kind of turned away a little bit from that turning point moment of felt no right at the beginning to
I was
backtrack.
ready for
So,
it.
was there anything quite having enough for you? Um, was there anywhere? Obviously, there's challenges there with the family situation, and I'm assuming watching your mom, and you said she was at university. What was she studying at university while she was trying to care for a family at the same time?
Education, adult education.
She wanted to work as a teacher or in the university or college, or
Yeah,
what was
her
the?
she just was really focused on making sure to get her degree. I think that was really, really important. And then she even got a master's degree, as well. She ended up working for the government, in HR, but she'd studied her degree in sort of adult education and that sort of thing. And so it was important to her to get her degree so that could see through her example.
Is that where you believe that a lot of your deep belief comes from? Is being in that environment where your mom obviously, wasn't going to accept no or whatever she powered through. Is that where that deep belief you spoke at the very beginning comes from, you think?
I think so. I think she instilled, without doing it on purpose necessarily, but she instilled this mindset that if you want something, you really have to go after it yourself. And watching her work hard and create these opportunities for our family, to your point, shaped how I approach life. And that's probably why the idea of recruiting myself for college soccer didn't feel unusual. Just felt like, you do what you do, you really go after something when you really want something, and you figure it out.
And then, because you also said there when you went to New York, you were always in the internship at Madison Square Garden, you was always looking for opportunities above your peers. Was that always something from the very beginning that you were always looking for an edge over your teammates, your competitors, or was it just always about improving yourself? What talk to me a little bit about that idea of creating opportunities for yourself above those around you?
I think that lesson itself was predominantly around, jobs. So you learn in university, especially if, I wanted to be in sports marketing and I knew how competitive it was. And you have to set yourself up for success and be your own hero. And so I knew that I had to do more, especially being committed to Division 1 sports and soccer. I wasn't able to do all these extra things because I was focused on, I need to be great in this area. But once I was finished with my soccer career, then I was able to these opportunities that would help, beef up my resume and kind of separate me from everybody else, or at the time, that's kind of what I felt. I think in general, creating opportunities in life is sort of a theme that has, always been there, and maybe not even realizing it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to. So you didn't really realize that earlier on. That was more when you was into a competitive job market than anything else.
Yeah, but I think but when you're playing soccer, you want to be better than everybody else, right? You want the most playing time. You want to be the one that's taking the first PK. You want to, I loved, I want to be the one that's taking all the kicks across the field, the corner kicks, etc. And I want to score all the goals. And so you do look at, how do I separate myself? And so you train harder. You wake up early. I think you sacrifice a lot. When my friends are hanging out, I need to get my run in first, that kind of thing. And that is still in me kind of to this day. And I'm sure we'll get into some of that. But I think, deep down, you always want to, I'm very competitive, maybe too competitive at times. And so I've always had that competitive spirit. And I think even more, I've had this fight in me. When I was born, Lee, I almost died. I had the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck, and I didn't get to see my mom. I was rushed to a different hospital and didn't get to be with my mom, I think, for 3 days, if not more. And so I had to really fight, I think, before I was even, I had to fight to survive. And I think that it is in me in general. And then through different, dynamics growing up in a tough household, with the dynamics with my dad, I really had to kind of be a fighter to kind of survive. And so that fight is just in me, which can be a gift and a curse, more usually a gift, that has helped me throughout my entire life.
Yeah, I was going to say, because not everybody has that makeup or that DNA that they want to do the work to be the best, right? Especially as a soccer coach, I see so many players that say that they want to be the best, but they're not going to make the sacrifices, or they're going to do the work that they need to do to do that. It comes through repetition and time and practice and dedication. So I'm always interested. The whole idea of me starting this podcast was about learning where that kind of comes from. Where does that mentality come from? Where does that attitude come from? Does it come from something that is genetic? Obviously, if you go through a traumatic incident when you're being born, although you probably don't remember that, like physically, like there's something inside of you that, is, from day dot, right? You're fighting against something. So I'm always curious how environment plays a part in that, or how it's just maybe a genetical, or how we train that kind of mentality. So it's always interesting to me to where that comes from. And I know when we spoke previously, I'd mentioned from previous conversation with people about that power of yes versus the power of no. And you kind of said to me that you've never really had that choice, or feel like you've had that choice to a degree, that you just always have to continue to carve out those opportunities for yourself. And yeah, I'm just really interested where that mentality comes from, through everything that you've been, and that idea about creating opportunities in the job market, how early you kind of experienced that. Whether that was when you was 5 years old, or whether that was when you started your soccer career at 11 or 12. But yeah, it's an interesting step. Are your family similar in competition and competitive spirit that you are?
Yes. My mom was a hockey player, and so she's very competitive, and I credit her. We walked so much, we walked to the store, we walked to the playground, we walked everywhere, rain, snowstorm, you name it. So very athletic. And she's very competitive. My sister is very competitive. She might even be more competitive. She's a perfectionist. She's an engineer. She also played soccer. So I had somebody to be like, hey, let's go. I need to work on my foot skills. Let's go do some one-on-one, that sort of thing. So my sister is also really, really competitive. And so I think being around like-minded people who want to be better, I think is always helpful, so what you surround yourself with really helps your success then, and also later in life. Always pushing each other to be better. Love listening to podcasts, love your podcast. based on just the path, the journey, the resilience, learning about people, human nature. It's so fascinating. The more we can learn and grow and stay connected, I think the better we as a society can be. We love a couple other podcasts that, focus in on emotional intelligence and health and different things like that. So I think, competition doesn't always have to be on the field. It's also your mindset and what you're doing every day to get better. And I think every day I want to be better than the previous one. I'm a VP of marketing and brand at a fabulous company, and I'm so grateful, but I still want to be better tomorrow. And what am I doing today? What am I listening to? What am I engaging with? Am I working out every day to keep my mind strong, to work on my mental health, all that kind of stuff. So I think competition with my family, my mom, my sister is really competitive. And, you surround yourself, teammates, friends, it really takes a village. So, without my mom, I wouldn't be where I am today. And then also the community that we moved to, if you had money or you didn't, and I really credit my mom for this, is we were able to play in the same teams as the people with the most money, right? And so that helps bridge a gap. And then it was really, really helpful. We could have moved to Halifax, Nova Scotia, where we would have been surrounded by family, but a much bigger city creates, right? Economic differences and that sort of thing. And so she had the foresight to think, hey, I'm going to actually go to this city that I've never lived in before because I think this is going to afford the best opportunities for my daughters.
Stories of resilience like Marie's are meant to be heard far and wide. If this conversation is hitting home for you, please take a moment to share this episode with a friend or on your social media. Help us grow this community of people living beyond limits.
So obviously you talked about the village, you talked about the community there, but there's also that theme of recruiting yourself, right? So you're in an area where trying to get to a college in the US. When did that start to become a realization that that's what you wanted to do and didn't want to necessarily stay in, say, Canada, make that move? So talk to me a little about recruiting yourself, what that means to you and how that looked, where you were, and when did that start?
That's a great question, and I love that. I remember, and I don't even quite know why or how, but I just had this dream when I turned 14 years old. My dream was to get a scholarship to play soccer in the United States. And I think, going back to that early, very beginning kickoff question of an aha, I think that was a huge aha moment. I really was like, I would love my dream. And then you start even thinking about your dreams, right? Like, this is what I want to be when I grow up, or this is where I want to go, or this is what I want to do. And just this big dream was to play soccer in the US and get a scholarship to do so. At the time, women's sports in Canada, we weren't getting scholarships to play sports. In fact, there wasn't a lot of money in sports, which it was good and bad, right? A lot of access, but no money. Coaches aren't getting paid. So I think now the system is significantly better. But back then in 2001 or 1998, whatever, uh, there just wasn't an opportunity. And I was just enamored with this dream of getting a Division I scholarship to play soccer in college. Now, nobody is coming to New Brunswick, Canada. Maybe now they are. And in fact, if you're a soccer coach, I highly recommend you. If you're a college coach, there is just this amazing untapped talent in New Brunswick, Canada. And I think you should really explore if you're looking to get a little creative as a recruiter. Canada is where it's at, and the athletes there, the determination, the desire, we have something that others don't because we come from a small place that typically people are not recruiting from. So just a tip to your soccer coaches, Lee. But yeah, I really had this dream and I wanted to go after it. I remember I read this book called The Pursuit of Excellence. I think I have it here somewhere. I'll have to show it to you. But just reading that book helped me with goal setting and believe that I could do something. None of my friends wanted to go to the United States. I think a lot of my friends ended up going out west and then coming back to Canada. And, they got families early, et cetera, et cetera. And I think each person's journey is your own and unique to yourself. And so I just decided this is what I want to do. And how do I figure this out? And that's when I started training much harder, especially in high school. Um, Really, in the summer, I would have to work a summer job. And so I would train in the morning and then bike to my job and bike home and then go to practice. I look back now and I'm like, God, that sounds exhausting. How did I do that? And I loved working with kids. I was a referee, I was a soccer coach, I was a babysitter, I worked for the city, you name it. I worked so hard, but I managed to figure out how to be better every day with soccer. And I was getting up at 6 a.m., which is, especially as a teenager, is not that fun, right? Like we look at it like, oh, how does that person do it? It's not fun for most people to get up at 6 a.m., but you just do it. And so that's what I did. And along the way, my stepdad sometimes would come on his bike while I was running the track and bike around, or, I would run along the green and race the rowers every morning because it was next to the river and things like that. And you just kind of do it. If you think about it, you're probably going to set yourself back. So you just kind of have to 1, 2, 3 do it. And so that's what I did. And to make sure that I was working really hard at my dream every day. But when it came to recruiting, to your point, nobody was, especially at that time, going to New Brunswick, Canada. I played on the All-Star team. I played on the new team, New Brunswick. You name it. I played on the best teams, and I was probably the best player in addition to our goalie, who I'll tell you about later because she's connected to my story, Andrea Maston. She's best goalie in Canada, in my opinion, and she got to be my goalie. And Marguerite knows her really well too. But going back to the recruiting, instead of waiting to be recruited, I started reaching out to schools myself. I'm going to date myself, but I mailed VHS tapes of my games, of my highlights, of practicing, of my ball movement. I got a couple local men's high school players. I think JR and I think this guy Max, and then my sister was there, and Victor was recording from this giant video camera that we probably rented from the library, right? Like no iPhones, folks, no iPhones. And so, we put together, probably was a little bit janky, but this recruiting tape. And I looked up all these different schools. I wrote letters and I mailed tape after tape to different coaches. I don't think I realized I was doing anything unusual. I was just like, hey, I'm going to go after this thing and I really want it. And I think that experience really shaped, to your point earlier, how I approach life. If the door isn't open, sometimes you have to knock. And then other times, Lee, you have to build the door yourself. And so I think in that instance of recruiting myself, I built the door myself. And, I think what it says is that I believed in possibility before I had proof. I did not have a roadmap. I had this Pursuit of Excellence book. I had really supportive parents, but I had to do the work. My mom did not do any of that for me, and she wasn't crazy boastful. Daughter is this American player. None of that. I had to work really, really, really hard and to do it myself. And so I think that was also important because it was my dream. It wasn't anybody else's dream. Again, there weren't players going back to the roadmap. There was no players really ahead of me doing it, but I kind of had this sense of hard work. I took initiative and this belief that, if you believe in something big enough, you can make it happen. So recruitment to me was being relentless. And then I also worked on my game because I knew eventually if somebody saw me play or I had to be ready. And then I think lastly, going back to my mom and, just looking at, I'm so lucky that, I had her. She raised me as a single parent and she instilled that mindset that if you want something, you have to really make it happen for yourself and you have to take responsibility for your life. And that guided me, or that guides me to today. You have to be your own hero. Nobody's going to come and save you. You have to create your own luck. You talked about opportunity before, and I think it's Well, let me back up. There's a podcast called How I Built This, and at the end of the show, it's NPR How I Built This. At the end of every episode, they ask the guests, which they typically interview like entrepreneurs and that sort of thing, is it luck or is it hard work? And I think for me, it's a little bit of both. I could have been born anywhere, right? So that's the luck aspect, but you have to create your own opportunities, right? You have to make that magic happen. And so that's what helped me land where I am today.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Have you used, does anybody use that slogan, possibility before proof? I don't think I've heard that one before. And I hear a lot of the catchphrases and
I don't think
slogans
so.
when
I don't think so. But you know, it means like you really have to have this innate belief. You have to be a little bit crazy, right? You can't be like everybody else.
No, I look. I'm going to steal that one for something. I don't know what I'll steal it for. But no, through this podcast, I've come across different stories. That the one that I keep coming back to, like motivation follows action, is one that keeps coming back to me from an episode I did previously, and possibly before proof. Um, Definitely something that matches that as well. So that's yeah, I love those little things. The relentlessness about it is I think important to try and carve out those opportunities. You'll have to educate me a little bit on the recruitment process. But when did you? And I don't want to
Oh, I don't
age
mind.
you.
Yeah, we can totally do that. Yeah.
You when were you getting recruited to high school? When was to
Was I
college?
recruiting myself, you mean?
Really? When was your freshman year in
2001.
college?
Yeah, 2001.
So in 2001, obviously these days, highlight reels and you like all that is commonplace for recruiting athletes to college. Was that not the case in 2001? Was it coaches went to events to watch kids play and recruit them there? Was college highlight reels not really a thing when you were growing up?
Well, it certainly wasn't a thing in New Brunswick. I can't really speak for, the US, and I'm sure there was a degree of that.
Yeah, you weren't aware that that was a typical practice to get recruited.
I
Um,
just thought they got to, it's not like they're coming to see me, and so let me give them some action. My stepdad, I think it might have even been his idea, which was great, because I needed all the help that I could get. But yeah, I think now there's software and tools and platforms and seminars and all that stuff. And yeah, I just didn't have that at all. And like SAT study coaches, because remember, I didn't SATs and all that stuff. We don't need to do that in Canada. And so I had to, while I was doing my full school load, I had to kind of learn about this SAT thing and how to figure it out. I took a course with a bunch of my guy friends who were hockey players, and then we ultimately went um, to Maine, I think, to take the test. And anyway, yeah. So it wasn't normal. No,
So it wasn't commonplace for people in your area that will go and get a Division One scholarship in
no,
New York.
no,
No.
no, no, not even like close. Somebody who knew somebody like this older soccer player who I think ended up going to the University of Maine, and she was like a stud, and I'm sure she did amazing there, but like nobody I knew directly, nobody in my city. Yeah, I didn't know anybody.
Did anyone tell you it was unrealistic to achieve what you were setting out to do when you were 14?
Yeah, I think of course. I think a lot of people, and I think you have to be careful, right? You have to listen and learn. I think that's other people's own insecurities talking, their own beliefs or non-beliefs, if you will. And so, sure, people said, "Oh, that's tough," or "Okay," like, "All right," and then they watched me, and I think that's the best sort of, helping others see that it was actually possible.
Was that the best kind of fuel for you, or was it all about an internal challenge to yourself? Was the fact that it wasn't done commonly, or other people said you couldn't? Was that any kind of fuel, or was it all an internal drive that you just kind of naturally had from unwrapping that umbilical cord from around your neck when you were
Yeah,
settled in?
I don't know. I think about that sometimes. And I think that part of it was in me. I think that is a little harder to explain, and that's maybe the magic of the universe. The other part was maybe I did want to be different and do something different, and falling in love with soccer. And just, I remember watching like Marion Jones in the Olympics, and just, I had posters all over my wall of these amazing soccer players. Charmaine Hooper was a top soccer player in Canada growing up. I think also talk about a tipping point, 1999 Women's World Cup, right? It was 1999, I think.
Way
Whatever.
better.
But the US team, and watching the success of that, the Brandy Chastain sports bra, iconic sports bra moment, which might be one of the most top 3 iconic moments in sports, tipping point. So that's kind of my era of seeing these incredible women athletes, being so inspired. And then I think they truly inspired me to want more and want to do more. And and so I just went after it. So I think it could have been a little bit ingrained in me, but also maybe wanting to be different than everybody else, perhaps, right? When you look back, you're like, okay, why did I do the thing, and what made me, whatever. So I think that, and then also just the things that really inspired me and made me really feel something. And so that was sort of like, okay, I'm going to figure this out.
Did you know what was next after college? So at 14, Division 1 scholarship, soccer, that was the goal. Was was it was it clear what was after that, or was that just kind of tunnel vision? I'll figure it out when I get to that point, or did you have a plan of action after?
Great question. Equally, well, maybe not as equally, but I wanted to work in sports marketing. We had a family friend who did sports marketing. He lived in Toronto. Um, I was like, oh, that's a cool job. And you get to work in sports, and you get to like promote it. Like, what does that mean? And so I started learning about a marketing coordinator. What does that mean? What does that entail? Um, and I started just realizing like this marketing thing I think is for me. And when I went to college, unlike a lot of my good friends who had, 7 different, attempts at different degrees in science and nursing and advertising and whatever, I knew I wanted to be in business, and specifically in marketing, following my career. Because especially then, if you were going to go on to play pro, you're not making any money and the opportunities are really small. I think we're improving, and there's a lot more opportunities and pay equity and things of that nature. At the time, for me, it was like, I'm going to do this thing in college and it's going to be amazing. And then I'm going to have a career in sports marketing. And I think one of the other reasons is sports really inspired me, but I love community. And I think nothing brings people together like sports does. Maybe sports and music, right? It is the ultimate unifier of people across the world. And I wanted to be a part of that.
Finding your own path takes grit and vulnerability. If you're enjoying our journey with Marie Keeler, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. Your support is the fuel that helps us bring these incredible stories to you every week.
You said that obviously soccer was a catapult, right? From 11 years of age, 14, maybe when you're making all like that. That kind of really focused your efforts into, I need to get better, I guess, technically, physically, mentally. You was the only girl on a boys' team, trying to be the best there and then be the best player you can, and then outside your comfort zone to get recruited. So, how many of those lessons kind of transferred into life in college, life in marketing? You already talked a little bit about the brutal nature of having to rise above your peers just by. So you talked to me a little bit about the lessons from kind of sport, high school. I haven't really talked about your academics. Were you a smart student in school, or was it all about kind of the athletics? Obviously, you need the grades. Obviously, in the SATs, you talked about a little bit. Um, how much of these skills are kind of interlinked and kind of transferable from one to the other?
Well, I think I was similar to who I was on the field is who I was in the classroom. And so I don't think I was the smartest kid, but I worked really, really hard. I studied hard. I put in the effort to be an A minus student. My sister was a lot smarter than me, engineering, physics, you name it. I had to work at it, but I loved English and math and learning. I think curiosity is so fundamentally important. And so I, for the most part, enjoyed it. I would say not physics class or bio, I liked business and I'm right brain. I'm very creative. I don't like to be put in a box. But I do think similar to who I was on the field is who I was in the classroom, because you needed good grades. If I didn't have the grades that I did, I would not be, I would not have gotten those opportunities to come to the United States and play soccer in college. That my grades really, really helped me. And then in college, I had to keep up those grades because I played Division 2 first and then Division 1. And Division 2, these coaches, they don't have a ton of money. They have to be creative. And so you have to be versatile. I don't think, I think balance is really, really important. And so I think it's really critical to be a great athlete, but also how are you leveraging those skills in the classroom to be great overall? And then I think that kind of is connected to leadership too.
Was the FDU's where you went to school, right? Originally,
Well,
was that
I went to West Virginia Wesleyan College. Shout out to Coach James, who got the tape and loved it. And here we are today. So I went to a school in Buckhannon, West Virginia. I loved it. And I think it was a really great opportunity. I was there for 2 years. And then my dream came true of getting a full ride to a Division 1 school. Coach Gagliotti, shout out to him. I just saw him recently and I keep in touch with him. He's your typical New Jersey Italian, soccer coach. And so, yeah, my earlier on, I talked about the goalie, who's the best goalie in Canada, Andrea Maston. She went straight to Fairleigh Dickinson University in New Jersey. She met Marguerite before I did. And when coach was looking for some quality players, she recommended me. And that's where the change happened. So that's just, I trained really hard and I was ready, but gosh, how lucky was I to have one of my former, teammates recommend me for this amazing opportunity. And, I was studying marketing and I was going to graduate with a business marketing degree in West Virginia, which, when you think about it, and internships and opportunities, especially I wanted to be in sports marketing, were less. So the opportunity to go to Teaneck, New Jersey, which is 20 minutes from New York City, quick little GWB, crossover. Wow. And so I think I just got really, really lucky with that. And shout out to Andrea.
well, that's the kind of crossover between the luck and the hard work conversation, right? Is do you through all the hard work that you do you earn those opportunities that some people call luck, or people can just perceive it as fate? I always say this. I always used to have an argument with my English teacher in school that fate doesn't exist because we always have a choice on what we choose to do. And then because we were reading literature at the time, Thomas Hardy, Return of the Native, and old themes about the metaphors and fate and this, and I'm like, I don't believe in it. I believe you always have a choice in what you choose to do. So yeah, but building those connections, right? Networking is always really important, and being open to those opportunities is key. So the was New York kind of the hub of where you felt you wanted to go? Was West Virginia just because the coach was the one that kind of picked up a young video and gave you belief, or what were the choices that you kind of had based on how you recruited yourself?
Love that. With my self-recruitment, I got to choose, with all that hard work, I got to choose between two schools. One was in North Carolina, one was in West Virginia, obviously. And one had a football team and one didn't. And I grew up in Canada, football's cool, but hockey was our thing. But watching TV and, everything, I was like, there's going to be way more schools at this school that has a football team. And so that was a big part of my choice, is just thinking about the experience, the culture, the pride, all of that. And so that's why I chose to go meet my coach, and ultimately decide to go there. Part of it was like they had a football team, and that sounded cool, and that's school spirit. And so that was a choice. And then meeting my coach and the way he talked and his philosophy around soccer, and I just felt connected, and he was fun. I think that's the thing we don't talk about enough is, life is short. We're here to have work hard and be a good human and be kind. But I do think on your day-to-day basis, what are you doing to have fun? And he was fun. Our practices were brutal, maybe even more brutal than my Division 1 team. But it was also fun. And then, through adversity and hard work, you build these really strong bonds with your teammates. And I'm friends with many of my teammates to this day, which I feel so fortunate for. So that was a choice. And then when the opportunity came up to potentially go to New Jersey, that's when I started thinking about, okay, after college, what am I going to do? And what a great opportunity. I never really was like, I need to work, I need to be in New York City, I didn't know. I just, it was kind of one thing after another. But then when I started to really spend time and think about it, sports marketing, New York City, obviously way more opportunities. So it just made sense. And then, so the dream came true, but then the opportunities also happened because, and I had to work hard. I didn't know anybody. I had to interview and do all these things. But once I was done with my soccer career, I was able to intern at Madison Square Garden. I was able to work at Marvel Entertainment on Fifth Ave, and just listen to these licensing experts that were so fascinating, and in very New York. I'm still a green Canadian, and here I am commuting into the city, and now I go, oh, we go into the bodega, and now I'm into this coffee because you're exhausted because you're commuting at 7 a.m. on a bus to Port Authority, and then you're walking and you have two different sets of shoes because you got to walk with your tennis shoes, and then you get to the office and you put your nice shoes on, right? All of that. A bagel and coffee was like, I looked forward to that so much at 8 a.m. at my desk. It's the little things that kind of made a big difference. But going back to choices, that was an active choice that I made that helped set me up for success.
What was the internship at Madison Square Garden? What was that revolving around? Was that just
Yeah,
learning
it
it
was
and seeing it?
it was in the sports properties division, and it was marketing. And so I just assisted, I got to put together a few smaller marketing plans. Like there was these horses and they dance, and it was very strange. And I was like, this is weird. But that was the thing that I was given. I'm going to mess this up. Lippenzier stallions. Anyway, very cool. They would dancing horses and put together a marketing plan to get people to go to that. I also, at the time, Adam Thier and this guy, Sal, I think, is who I reported to. Adam Thier, big shout out to him. He gave me some advice that I've passed along and I've used throughout my career, which I'll share in a second. But boxing, I remember like, you'd work really hard to get to the city and you're an intern. You're like, I'm going to do these amazing things. And you're filling like boxing flyers, right? Around the ticketing area. And it was like very not glamorous. But then some of the glamorous things was helping out with the Harlem Globetrotters event. And there was this, I think she like led the operations at MSG.
Our apologies for the static. I guess the internet wasn't ready for this much possibility before proof and decided to give us a brief intermission. We've rebuilt the door, so let's get back to it.
Test.
It's all fun and games in the world of podcasting, and so.
Well, you handle it. You handle it so well.
Well, what are you going to do?
Well, that's true. What are you going to do? You're just going to keep going. Yeah. Well, kudos to Adam Thier. He said to me, which I tell a lot of my mentees and just people that I work with, friends, he was like, keep in touch. Like the internship was about to be over, and he was like, keep in touch. And he sort of was teaching me about networking and the power of networking and building these bridges that, you're not always asking for something, you keep the relationship going. And so he said, keep in touch. And what that means is, we spent this time together and we had a good experience and you worked really hard. He was the VP of MSG Sports Properties and just a lovely human, loved tennis. So we had a lot of things in common, but he told me to keep in touch throughout my career. And you never know the value of that because you might need advice, or maybe when you apply for a job, he knows somebody who is there, or he knows somebody that knows somebody. And so he said, hey, like, keep in touch. So sometimes you forget, but throughout my career, hey, Adam, just got my first professional job out of college. I'm at All-American Games. It's great. Hey, Adam, just produced this really cool reality show that aired on MTV2. It was great. Hey, Adam, I moved to Detroit. What's happening? As you go on, I think I probably haven't done the best job in the last, couple of years, but I have told him, where I am and what I'm doing. And funny enough, one of the professors at ASU knows Adam even better than I. And we met and she was like, do you know? And I spoke to her class about marketing and business and that sort of thing. And then after she's like, you know who Adam Thier is? And I was like, yes. And she was like, well, let's take a picture and send it to him. Oh my God, I can't believe this. It's a small world. And I think that's the other thing for people to know. It is a small world, right? And so the priceless things that we have is our relationships and how you build and grow those. And so that was really helpful to get that advice from him. And also I share that with others, and some people do it and some people don't, and I think that's interesting. I have people to this day that follow up with me and let me know how they're doing and where they are in their career. And I try to give back. And then some people, they don't. And so I think it's a valuable piece of advice. I also listened to a podcast called The Jordan Harbinger Show. I've listened to it for years and years and years. And one of his biggest things is he does a 5 or 6 minute, because the 5 minute one was taken, but a 6 minute networking class. And he's all about kind of keeping the well full before it goes dry, which means you check in with different people and you create these systems so that, let's say you need a new job or advice or whatever. It's not like, hey, Lee, I haven't talked to you in, 6 years, but I saw that so-and-so. It's keeping it fresh, right? And so I think that's ultimately kind of what Adam was getting at.
Yeah, it's definitely a piece of advice that I wish I would have been told when I was 15, 16, because I'm learning how important that is now, and probably did not play enough importance in it for the last 15, 20 years or so. It definitely becomes more important. The interesting dynamic is the kind of the energy that you put into yourself as a driven career woman to pursue, a very cutthroat world. I would assume marketing, advertising, maybe fashion is probably more cutthroat than any kind of that. But I can imagine it's a difficult space to get into because it's quite a big avenue for a lot of people, right? Like business and marketing seems to be very popular in most colleges. So how do you balance that? Building a community, building a network, but then still obviously going after it yourself. I think it's an important balance for people to try and find.
I think just, marketing is really twofold. I think you need two things to be great at marketing. One is relationships. So creating, managing, keeping, maintaining, growing relationships. And the second is creativity. And so if anybody's kind of interested or thinking about a career in marketing, if you have those two things, you can probably go pretty far. So I think managing relationships, also on the field, right? You are working with 10 other players on the field at one time, and then, 18 in general with coaches. Who are you when times are tough? Who are you when times are great? How are you managing those relationships, your family relationships and dynamics, your peers, your colleagues? And so I think just managing relationships is really critical. Communication is something I continue to learn to this day, how to be a better listener, how to talk slower, which I need to remind myself today to talk a little bit slower, and how to get your point across, how to be heard. There's so many books out there that I think are helpful. And so there's a lot of tools that we have to try to be better every day. And so even though, I am where I am, I can definitely improve on my communication, and I think I'm pretty self-aware about that. But I also think everybody could, you know?
We'll be right back with more from Marie Keeler. In the meantime, if you want to help us share these stories further afield, please subscribe and leave a review. Let's inspire others to build their own doors together.
There's something interesting that we spoke about before, kind of in our call before we set this up, was kind of about authenticity and struggle. And the thing that I have wrote down here was that you said a story isn't authentic if it doesn't include struggle. That's a note that I took from our previous conversation. Is that something that you kind of associate with in terms of authenticity? I mean, everybody goes through struggle and challenge, right? I've been made aware recently of making sure not to always emphasize the struggle, but to emphasize the hope and the optimism on the other side, because a lot of these stories that I talk to people about on this podcast, the stories are all very similar. Everybody has challenge, everybody has struggle, everybody comes out the other side. But I don't it depends if you've got if you go through the bush and you have all this bramble in your hair and you're stuck, and how quick you take. But everybody goes through the same situation, just in different ways, maybe different extremities. So do you feel that struggle is necessary for authenticity, and how do you kind of push yourself through that? Is it through goal setting? Is it through just that belief in yourself? Is it through just recognizing that there is a possibility or an opportunity on the other side of that? What kind of helps you through that, and what keeps you authentic to your own story?
Yeah, I think to your point, everybody goes through a struggle, no matter who you are, no matter how much money you're making, no matter where you came from. I think the journey in life, a big part of it is the struggle, the ups and downs. Who are you through adversity, right? They always say, or many people say, when things are great, you're great. But who are you when you're struggling through adversity? Do you have the same beliefs? Do you treat people the same? And so I think the struggle is important in life. And I think vulnerability is also really, really important, because people can feel when something isn't real. So the more real you are, the more it allows other people to be real. So if you ever had a conversation and somebody starts opening up and actually being vulnerable, it kind of invites you to do the same thing. Now you feel a little more comfortable. So who can you be in those moments, and how can you spark and inspire others to be their authentic selves? You talk about success, the illusion of if it's easy or if it's not easy. I think every meaningful journey is a struggle. I think recruiting myself, that was a struggle. And then working hard throughout college, balancing class, doing both, trying to be a great marketer one day while also trying to be great on the field, a struggle. Not to mention, you're learning more about yourself, you're missing your family, you're maybe have $5 to your name, you're figuring it out. The struggle. Who are you in those moments? And how can you stay true to yourself and be authentic? And also, how do you continue to learn about yourself? Because it's this constant, the older you get, the more you learn that you don't know you definitely don't know everything. And the more you uncover and learn about yourself, which I think unlocks that power to greatness. There was a Jay-Z quote back in the day. I wrote it down. I think he was on an interview with Oprah, and he said the foundation to everything great is knowing yourself, right? And at the time I was like, that sounds really great, but I didn't really grasp what it means. And now, as we talk about struggle and authenticity, really knowing who you are and your value system, that helps with, as we kind of connected on earlier, choices, decision making, how you show up every day, through hard times and that sort of thing. And then, especially as a woman in sports, a predominantly male dominated industry, there's a lot of times where I had to prove myself over and over again. Moments where maybe I wondered whether I belonged in the room. Moments where you kind of have a self-doubt, and then you have to dig deep, which is a saying we used to say at West Virginia Wesleyan, dig deep in those tough moments to win on the soccer field. Dig deep, in those moments where maybe you're doubting yourself in the boardroom. And I think that's really important, Lee. And I think those experiences are actually the most important part of our story because that's what shapes our resilience. When leaders are willing to talk about those moments honestly, it, like I said in the beginning, it gives other people permission to do so and to keep going through their challenges and to know that it doesn't end here. And then the belief that, if I looked back on my journey, it sort of always have gotten better, and times when I really, really struggled, I've faced a lot of difficult moments, and just having a deep faith of it will get better, which also is paired with a lot of hard work. And so that's sort of my view on struggle. I think it shapes you into who you are, and just kind of have to continue to adapt, believe, grow, and anything is possible.
I kind of obviously digging into the subject of resilience for quite a while now through these conversations, but a lot of it comes down to daily habits, daily practices.
Yeah.
Same as if you're developing any kind of skill. I know you played tennis, right, as well in college, and I'm sure in any kind of marketing, like the more repetition you do, the more you learn about your, faults, or you learn about your strengths. So, but what I find is that people look at, say, resilience as a overarching skill of, just bouncing back or digging deep. But resilience is made up of 20 or 30 different daily habits that you can practice, which prepares you for that moment. Um, so if I was to ask you to look at digging deep in terms of how you trust that process, that when, because things are going to get better, like what does that look like in the moment, in the process for you? What does digging deep for you look like?
Hope, having hope is a big part of it. Really believing that it'll get better in your worst moments. Giving yourself grace to just be and think and reflect and figure out. I think we as humans don't give ourselves enough grace. And so I think that that's really important. And then the other piece of that is really having hope. You got to have something to believe in. You have to look back and go, hey, it has always gotten better. This will get better. Here are the things that I need to do in order for that to happen. And then days where maybe you take a break, watch some Netflix, go on the soccer field with your friends, go have a drink. Just give yourself grace, take a beat, and then hit it even harder the next day. Depending on whether that's working through a struggle, whether that's trying to get a new job. I think that is that's really, really important. So hope is a fundamental, piece, I think, of our human spirit and what can help keep us going.
And I want to focus on the hope and the optimism. Um, but to kind of dig into that process, would you mind sharing, like, has there been a real difficult moment in terms of your career as a you talked about being a woman in sports, female in sports is difficult in a male dominated world predominantly. That's changing a lot, I would assume, as times have gone. But you've kind of gone through a process where it has been really difficult. Do you remember one specific moment, or kind of go back to that first question of the morning, um, like the hardest moments that you've suffered in that as proof? What was that possibility before proof, right? Like you've shown the proof and show that
Yes.
it is possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one, I worked with some really fantastic men. So I just want to make it clear that it's not black and white and it's not everybody, but it's definitely a thing. And it's something that I think a lot of my female peers can relate to in terms of getting better. Yes and no, but yes, but then, we take steps back. I think men, and again, I've been really fortunate. My partner at Fox Sports, Lee Bill Evans, was amazing, and we had such a fantastic team. We were brand marketers, so we were able to accomplish a lot together because we believed in team. And he was a feminist. He's a great dad of two girls, and so he was wonderful. My current boss, CEO Eric Moses, is phenomenal, right? So I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by some fantastic men. But I do think in general, it is still a male dominated industry. We still have to show up and be able to be our authentic selves. But as a woman, if I spoke the same as maybe my peer Dan or somebody, I'm being direct. I'm very direct, efficient. I care deeply, but that can come across as aggressive. But a man has never really been called necessarily, or typically in the same situation, aggressive. So it's kind of working through that. It's leading and kind of teaching that, I'm just a woman. But the fight is real. And I think a lot of, we're not the same. We're not looked at the same. We have to, there was a documentary with Beyonce years ago. I think it was on HBO. And she talked about, she was firm. This is the setup that she needed. And she's a perfectionist and she wanted this exact setup. But she's coming across as a bitch, excuse my French, right? But reality, she's assertive. So I think a nice reminder for men to kind of take a step back and think, when women are being assertive, we are not being aggressive. We don't have ill intentions. We're just being the way you are, and so I worked with a lot of men, so I mirrored and mimicked a lot of how they act. But because I'm a woman, you have to be self-aware. And so I don't think we should change, but I do think education and being understood is really important. So I think that path, that has been challenging. It's definitely been challenging, very competitive, which is why I'm great at what I do. Because I worked hard, I put in the time, I put in the sacrifice, and I see a vision that, okay, this is good. I always want to be great. And so I think measuring that, and leading a team to do so is important. But this industry is tough. And so you have to rally your troops. When I was at Fox Sports, I was a part of Women of Fox Sports, and it was fantastic. Everybody empowered each other. And I think the gift of those type of programs is the networking and the power amongst each other. So, you're a coordinator, a manager, a director, a VP, a senior VP. You're part of Women of Fox Sports. You're part of a group that we want to be better and empower each other, et cetera, equity in the workplace, all of that. And then I remember walking down the hallway and, these senior women, hi, how you doing? You build those relationships. Now, when we're in different boardrooms, because we know each other, we're saying great things about one another, right? And I think that is really important. So I think as women first, you have to be the woman that maybe you didn't have. And I have had some great mentors, and I've had a lot of challenges with women in the workplace. So I think it's like, how do we help each other and empower each other and be that strong network, and forget the good old boys club. I think let's create our own good old club in general that is both men and women, that we lead by example. We speak very highly, we empower, if somebody maybe didn't do anything right, you pull them aside and say, hey, blah, 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 blah. Or if somebody complimented somebody to help confidence, right? Hey, somebody said this and you're doing a great job. I think recognition goes a really long way. And I think really being kind and being maybe somebody that maybe you didn't have, I think is all really, really important. So those are skills and things that I think, are really, really important.
Yeah, just listening to you talk, it's if obviously belief's a big word that keeps coming, right? And in this conversation, belief and hope and opportunity. So everything's always about. It feels like you never really believe that the barriers exist for you, and you have the belief that regardless of gender, race, whatever, regardless of anything, like the more that you focus on the goal, the objective, the hard work that goes into it, and believing that something will come of it, the barriers that are put up for you, there's multiple ways you can jump around them or get over them or go, so that just comes to your self-awareness of what you stand for, what you believe in, and not to let somebody tell you no, right? Because I know we had a conversation before about the player yes, player no, off this conversation.
Yeah.
But
I love that. I love when somebody tells me no.
yeah, What does that do to you when someone? I mean, that's how we started the conversation. So maybe we can do full circle.
Yeah.
In terms of, I mean, when was the last time someone told you no? Uh,
Probably yesterday, you know what I mean? And I think that's the first point of a negotiation. I think growing up, no, you can't go on this sleepover. And I was like, okay. And then I would negotiate. Oh, well, and I would try everything, try and get the yes. And if I didn't get yes and I got the no, at least I tried everything. I'm very solution oriented. I want to find a way. I want to find the solution. I want to figure it out. And then if the universe shuts it down, okay, that's my answer. But I think, I've had a lot of no's throughout my career. And in fact, at the very beginning of my career, after soccer, I wanted to be a sports marketer in the US. And I remember one of my amazing professors, a shout out to Eli Amdor at Fairleigh Dickinson University, who was just phenomenal. And I learned so much from him. So much. In fact, side note, his advice was ask for advice. Don't ask for a job. Don't ask for, help, blah, blah, blah. Ask for advice. Hey, Lee, I'm kind of thinking about a career in PR. Do you have any advice for me? And he would say, typically people will go, huh. And then now you're asking them for help. Now they're connected to your journey. Now they want to help. Oh, well, I might know so-and-so and I'll put in a good word or whatever. And what's the word? Or maybe the worst that can happen is they're like, yeah, I don't really have advice. Fine. So Eli Amdor was wonderful. He put me in touch with somebody because he knew I wanted a career in sports. This person that he put me in touch with was a big time MLB person on the big business side who connected me with somebody that he knew to help me, who was Canadian, who had a career here in the US. And what this person, we'll call him John, his name's not John, we'll call him John. What John said to me was, hey, Marie, this is really cool. I see you're graduating and with your master's degree. And, I got my master's degree and whatever. You know what, though? Like, you're not going to have a career here. It's too hard. Nobody's going to give you visas. You're not going to set yourself apart from your peers. It's already just really full and competitive in the sports marketing and the sports world. Everybody and their mom wants a job. And you know what? Just go back to Canada. It is not possible. And I said, did he just tell me I can't do something? Did he just tell me that this is not possible? Hold my beer. I don't even like beer, but like hold my beer. And I figured it out. And it was very hard, right? So like it was not easy, visa after visa. And I was grateful throughout. I think one thing we haven't talked about is gratitude. And no matter where you are, that gratitude in the moment, through hard times, through best times, recognizing, being grateful is really, really important, and has really helped me throughout my life and in my career. But he told me no. And I was like, well, I'm just going to roll up my sleeves and we're going to do this and figure it out. And that's what I did. And I bumped into him way later when I was successful and, had a coffee and just, was like, yeah, I'm still here.
We're in the final stretch of this incredible conversation with Marie Keeler. If Marie's story of moving from Canada to the top of the sports marketing world has sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Take 30 seconds right now to send this episode to one person who needs a reminder that they don't need permission or proof to start their journey.
Do you think that attitude is something that can be learned in people, or is that something that's more pre-wired? Or is it based on, again, we're talking a little bit about your background, your family life, the experiences there. All those things contribute to it, I'm sure. But, what's your thoughts on whether people can learn that skill? And more importantly, my question is, I know I can learn that myself at 40 or 45 or whatever age is closer to the 45 than 40. Is that something that you can learn at a younger stage when you are kind of carving your path? When you're trying to figure stuff out, I'm trying to figure out when you can start to learn that ability to be curious about what you're capable of.
I think the fortunate part for me is it was ingrained in me before I even knew what it was, you know? And so it was instilled in me at a young age without understanding what it meant, but then also having great examples around me. Um, you know, number one being my mom who did the thing, right? Like, so it was really instilled in me, but then I also saw it, right? Through my experience growing up. So I think the people who, not everybody has it ingrained in them. I think it makes you probably a better fighter. You can push through adversity maybe a little more. I do think it can be taught to a degree, which is by example, by seeing others, by seeing, even like, this is gonna sound silly, but movies and television, that showcase, art as a life, right? Like when you see these stories and learn, or books, let's talk about books. You read a book, my favorite books is character development, where they come, go through a struggle and come out on top, those kind of things. Same with movies and TV shows. I think you learn by example. And so I think people can learn, um, but I think you have an edge when it's ingrained in you. I'm a much bigger fighter than a lot of people that I know, but it's because of, my upbringing and my life, things like that. And I also relate to others in a deeper way who have similar background experiences. But I do believe it can be taught to a degree, through examples, through watching other people, through consuming it. I think it just, the spark shines different, right? Dim, bright, really bright. What do you think?
What do I think? I
Yeah.
think it can be taught. Well, you got to be willing to. Um, you got to want to understand it and not be shut off, closed off. I know a lot of people. Um, Whatever happens to them, there's a barrier there they can't see through or over. Right? They just see no way, and they're not quite ready to. I don't know. Try and see. I don't know whether it's a lack of hope or they just think it's a dead end and they're not willing to do something different, try and change the situation.
Yeah.
Um, I think if you're willing and you practice it daily, I think it's something that you can develop as a skill and a trait. And I can only say that based on how I have personally tried to explore this idea of resilience and try and then implement those daily to see how it changes me. Um, because I can't say that everybody is going to be able to develop a different type of mentality to certain challenges. I still struggle sometimes in the reaction to things, but
Yeah.
I do find myself trying to take a pause more frequently. Um, I didn't do it this morning with the chipmunks in the wall, but it's something that I practice as much as I can, and I find it helps me not look at the struggle as much, but look at this is what it can become.
Yeah, I think that that's beautiful. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And then whether you get there quickly or whether you get there slowly is a different conversation, I think. And I think what your story tells you, like how driven you are at such an early stage in your career, in your life. Like I didn't have that idea of wanting to be a Division 1 athlete at 14 or wanting to go into sports marketing. Like I'm kind of changing career paths now through different mediums and trying to figure out what relates to me now.
Yeah.
I didn't have that at 14. I had no idea what I wanted to do in college at 17 or 18. So I've kind of been traversing that for 20 years, trying to figure out what my actual direction is. And yeah, so I think that drive, that goal, that purpose, developing that connection, that community is really important early. I think what you said there about asking for advice consistently is something that I did not do for a very, very long time. And you know, regret's a strong word because everything is, I don't believe in fate, but like those choices or those reasonings of why I did that, I believe, take you to where you're supposed to be to a certain degree. But staying connected and not, I do it with this podcast. I reach out multiple times. I think I reached out to you maybe 5, 6.
Loved it. Persist. Yes.
So you told me, no, I'll continue to reach out, right? And that's the same with a lot of different things. Is if I can get some advice or some help or some understanding of something from someone from somewhere, then I'll continue to try and ask those questions.
Well,
So
I admire you so much because, to create and lead a podcast and stay consistent is not easy. You're doing just that, and I think that is awesome, and you are persistent, and it pays off.
I think so. I think if you keep going, right, I think as your journey testifies, is like, I'm sure there's still plenty of mileage to go in your career and where you can go, but just being persistent and keeping doors open and continuing to ask questions and be curious is really important. Um, Last two questions for you, because we're coming to the end, is in terms of advice for young people in this current generation chasing their first opportunity. I think you've kind of touched on it in some of the other parts of this conversation, but what would be that advice in terms of how to decide what opportunities to go after, or people looking to chase that first opportunity, or maybe you're in a situation like I was when I was 17 and don't really know what direction to go. What kind of advice would you give to individuals like that?
I can only really speak to advice on not what the opportunity is. I think you got to know it yourself, right? Like, I can't tell you what the opportunity is. However, I can speak to going after that opportunity. We talked a lot about belief. There is a little bit of crazy that you need, and maybe crazy isn't the right word. But what I mean by crazy is you really have to believe in it, because there's a lot of obstacles. You're going to, you know, gosh, my time at All American Games, I was ready to make the next step. I applied for a job. I went through the whole interview process. It was a company called Fox Sports in Atlanta. So it was the regional Fox Sports in Atlanta. I got the job. I was really excited, but I was like, I'm not going to fully celebrate yet. I need to get the writing, the offer. And ultimately, they ended up saying they took the job offer back because they couldn't sponsor me, right? I required sponsorship visa, etc. So imagine going, okay, next chapter, here we go. And I remember finding out in the parking lot at my job in New Jersey, and shedding a tear and being a little sad. And I was like, okay, I can be sad today. Today's my day to fully feel bad for myself, all that. But tomorrow, we're back at it. This just wasn't, I probably wasn't woke enough to know like this wasn't for me that day, but I knew you can be sad one day and then you got to turn the page. And the next day I turned the page. And what I didn't know at the time was that just wasn't for me. That was not where I was supposed to go in this universe. I would, the world has something bigger that I don't even know. And ultimately that ended up being a marketing manager job at the Detroit Lions, and working in the NFL, the biggest sports conglomerate in the country. Huge opportunity. I got a little lucky, but I also earned it. And I was the last person to interview, and it was like there was 4 people on one side of the table and little old me on the other, and I was the last, and I crushed my interview because I prepared so much. And I got to move to Detroit and work for the Detroit Lions, where I met amazing connections and people, and I had a lot of growth, and I was just so fortunate. I also faced a number of challenges that helped me get better. And so I share that in saying you create your opportunities, but when no comes along, or you fail, or this is just a lesson, it's gonna, you have to believe in something bigger, and this was not meant for you. And similarly, there's been job opportunities, maybe a dream job where I got turned down. I made it all the way to the end, and and then I got turned down, but now I see that just wasn't for me. And so it's almost like dating. You got to, throw your card out there. You got to try. You got to go after multiple things. I had a young person in my office yesterday, and I gave him a nice recommendation, and I just gave him some advice. Like, you have to create these opportunities so that hopefully you can pick, right? And then you can, going back to the choices, you leverage your power of decision making, what's important to you fundamentally to make those decisions. And so I think being able to take a no and learn from it, but also know it's just setting you up for something way better, I think is really important, because there's a lot of challenges, especially in today's world. So for those who are just starting out, or throughout your journey, it's just going to get you to the next yes that's even bigger than you can think of.
And the last question, kind of a twofold question for you, but so when you from New Brunswick to where you are now in Scottsdale, right, Arizona, what part of that journey are you most grateful for? Because I know you speak a lot of gratitude there at the end, and we haven't talked about that a lot. And then, what do you think you would tell your 10-year-old self today, if you had to say anything back to her when she was 10 years old?
I'm most grateful for my community, my friends, my teammates, the people in my life that have supported me, because you can't do this alone. So I'm so grateful for the amazing friends, the amazing teammates, uh, Brandy, who was our captain at West Virginia. She was so inspiring, and she's such a badass, and I wanted to be like her. I'm friends with her to this day. I'm so grateful for that. You interviewed amazing, amazing woman, Marguerite, who ended up being my roommate. And that's how we became close when I moved to New Jersey, and, North Point at FDU. Roommates were very similar, and we've just been on this journey together. We see each other all the time, and she's such a close friend, and I'm just so grateful for her. I'm grateful for, these amazing women that I get to work with. Gosh, when I was at Fox Sports, there's just such talented women all around me. Joy Taylor does a lot for women in the industry, and it's just, she motivates me and inspires me and reminds me to keep going. And when you have this shared commonality of being a woman in sports and growing and wanting the best for everybody, and how you do that, you need to be kind of around like-minded people. I think that's really important. My parents are super supportive. My sister is amazing. My best friends are amazing. And so I think, the people, I'm most grateful for the people. I think, secondly, I'm grateful for the setbacks, because that's where your comebacks are. And your comebacks are going to be way better than you can ever imagine. And so I think the setbacks, or even failures, whether you fail on a project, you learn the most from them. So it's okay. It's actually a good thing. I think even in relationships, whether it's dating, or if you get in an argument with people, I think that's important, because that helps grow the relationship. If everything's perfect all the time, nobody's going to learn, nobody's going to grow. You're not going to be challenged. So I think being challenged is key. Going back to Coach James and this full circle soccer moment, he said something so important my freshman year was get out of your comfort zone, right? So when you're training and you want to be better and you want to be fitter, and, those 120-yard sprints times 12 where you want to die, how are you getting out of your comfort zone? You can maintain so you're not dying, right? But you're never going to get to that next step. I would stay outside in high school when I was, 15, 16, 17, juggling the ball. I was the best juggler in New Brunswick. Nobody could beat me, but I juggled every single day. Um, I would get 50 juggles, and I'm like, tomorrow I need to beat my record, and tomorrow I need to beat my record, and tomorrow I need to beat my record. And so I'm really grateful to have that mentality, because again, that helps me where I am today. Both, how do I be a better friend, a better daughter, a better sister? How do I be a better colleague, which is important because I care so much? How do I be better in my daily, taking our marketing to the next level? There's a lot of exciting things that we're doing at the Fiesta Sports Foundation. We just had a semifinal game. We CFP semifinal. That was the best game in all of bowl season. And we got to do some really cool, unique things. I did this really cool creator house where instead of, people competing against each other, they came together and we owned the digital conversation around the Fiesta Bowl. And, we want to get younger. How do I continue to do that? I get to work on promoting women's sports. We have the first ever women's National Flag Football Collegiate Classic here coming up at Tempe at ASU in April. And I get to promote women's sports. I am so grateful to do that. So gratitude. I'm grateful to have my gratitude. My mentor, Amy Sasser Sorrells, at my first job, she's just this amazing human, taught me spiritual practice, taught me adversity, and just how she handled adversity in life struggles, and her daily spiritual practice plays into what I do daily. So you talked about earlier, okay, how does one go after an opportunity? How does one, right? And you talked about daily rituals and practices. It starts out with a daily, you have to be disciplined. And what are you doing daily? How are you spending more time with your mind? There's Netflix and streaming and sound and always on. How do you take a second, even if it's 10 minutes in the morning, read from a spiritual something or a book or whatever, and then spend time with your mind, whether that's through prayer or meditation? That helps you get better. That sets you up for success for the day. Working out sets you up for success for the day. For me, right? Endorphins, it's who I am from college, and I feel like if I don't do it, I'm not, right? So that's okay. What drives you? What sets you up? So I'm grateful for all those things. And then to your second question about what I would tell my 10-year-old self, I think confidence is so important, both inner and outer confidence. And one of my dreams and goals is to help instill confidence in our youth. I think that fundamentally sets people up for success. And what is confidence? It's the ultimate belief in yourself. And so, when you have that, even though you get negativity, you can battle it, you can fight it, you can grow. I think just having confidence, again, belief, fighting through the struggle, believing that you can achieve anything, because you can. You just have to put in the work. And if somebody tells you no, use that as fuel to your fire. And like I said before, tell me no, and I'm going to figure it out until I'm really told no. And then I'll back off. I think it will always get better. I think try new things, have fun, be adventurous. Life is so rich and we're so lucky to be here. Be grateful. Learn, be a good human. What are you doing for others? I think I read this book, and one of the best pieces of advice from this monk was, when you're self-centered, you're unhappy. So make it about other people. You can still fulfill what you want, but when you're going through really difficult times, maybe think about others. How can you help others? When you're walking down a trail, you don't even have to say hi, but wish good luck. Tell that person to have a good day. In your head, even good energy. The world is all about really good energy. So you get what you put in. So what are you doing to give that good energy? So to my 10-year-old self, give that good energy. To my 10-year-old self, it will get better. Keep working hard. Believe in yourself. Be a good person. And have even more confidence. I think that's really, really important. And I fought through that. I had to really create my own confidence. And I think that is really important.
A huge thank you to Marie Keeler for joining us today and for being so willing to share the vulnerability behind her success. From her Emmy-winning work on the global stage to her leadership at the Fiesta Sports Foundation, Marie is a powerful example of what happens when you lead with both a competitive spirit and an authentic heart. I'm taking away a new slogan today, possibility before proof. I hope it sticks with you too. If you enjoyed this journey, please hit subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode to help us reach more listeners further afield. You can find more information about Marie and the Fiesta Sports Foundation in the show description. Thank you for listening to Embracing the Journey, Living Beyond Limits. My name's Lee Bakewell, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you for listening.